Hi everyone, welcome to G News. This is a commentary on the Ben Doyle controversy that has been in our news now for about 2 weeks. It starts with some coverage using fair use commentary on Winston Peters and how he wouldn't actually bring allegations of any kind of really bad behaviour when it came to Benjamin Doyle when put to him on the platform by Sean Plunkett.
Are you accusing him of encouraging paedophilia and illegal sexual relations with children?
No, what I'm saying to him, Mr. Doyle, why did you pull those posts down if they put them up with sound intent? And what did they have on them? And would you please explain to the mainstream media and all those other people who were thinking about going down that parkway, why don't you explain to Sean Plunkett what those posts were all about?
As you know, eventually the explanations that Winston Peters was looking for were made very clearly by Ben Doyle earlier this week.
Referring to myself in this way on Instagram is an expression of my queer identity, and it acts as a persona, much like a drag performer or a comedian might use. The caption, which references me, is an example of the way marginalised communities often reclaim or subvert language in order to exist unapologetically. I recognise that bussy is not a term all rainbow people use or like, but it is one that is commonly understood and appreciated by my friends and community. For me, this term is wordplay and represents the combination of my masculine and feminine qualities as a non-binary person, someone whose gender doesn't fit into a strict category.
However, almost immediately, some commentators, like Duncan Garner, were getting the facts wrong and being quite inaccurate, as you can see here.
Benjamin Doyle, he couldn't muster the support of one of his MPs to stand beside him and stand with him as he spoke this week.
There was indeed a Green MP supporting Benjamin Doyle, and you can see her here in red, right next to Benjamin while he's talking. Then Duncan got it wrong again, saying that there were no whips, or as they call them in the Green Party, musterers present.
And the whips, the senior MPs usually present for this sort of appearance, they weren't there.
But as you can see, as people leave after the conference, here is Ricardo Menendez March in the room, and he is the Green Party whip. So Duncan was misleading his audience twice in the intro to the editor-in-chief. Now, there's been a lot of criticism about how social media does mislead audiences, and I think people need to be careful when listening to people that don't get their facts straight. Since the 31st of March, when Winston raised the issue and brought this to the attention of mainstream media, some social media commenters like Duncan have actually raised the expectation that Benjamin Doyle must resign before anyone had actually even heard his side of the story. And that's really unfair.
It's bad for the Greens, and there's only one way out, only one way to resolve this, and Doyle must resign.
But on top of that, we've had some analysis done over on the platform, which is a bit shonky when you look at it in detail. And that's what I'm going to do now.
Nothing to see here. I have done nothing wrong. Absolutely no admission of wrongdoing. I don't know if you've read any books on narcissists.
Sean Plunkett is not a clinical psychologist. He hasn't sat down with Benjamin Doyle and analysed his life and been able to come up with a clinical diagnosis of narcissism or any kind of personality disorder along those lines. Therefore, it's actually quite wrong for anyone on social media to proceed as if they could be doing a proper diagnosis and saying something like, this man or this person is a narcissist, just based on very, very sort of smearing and surface level judgments that they make.
But you will be disappeared by your narcissistic stupidity.
We also saw a complete intolerance or an inability for some people who may stereotypically be thought of as old dogs that cannot learn any new tricks. And it's this inflexibility that we often see possibly as people become older or senile. And here we see examples where people can't actually get around using new pronouns and effectively try to disappear anyone who might be non-binary. They just can't exist. They're not allowed to. So instead of being able to tolerate that or learn something new or adapt, the dinosaur is unable to adapt.
Benjamin Doyle, and could I just make it clear, I'm going to call him a him. And he can call himself a they, them, but it's so much easier to use the English language as it was intended, and to stick with the biological reality that Benjamin Doyle is a guy.
Amongst other things, you'll notice I'm not using they, them pronouns. For God's sake, we've got to stop this nonsense. Personality, you are a man, for God's sake. So I'll keep on referring to him as a man, and anybody that plays with this nonsense of they, them are equally guilty of entering into the sort of emperor's clothes stupidity.
When it comes to language, a great philosopher known as Ludwig Lichtenstein coined a kind of term that said meaning is use. And meaning is use is versus the dictionary definition. And I think when you use language, it has different meanings. It's slippery, it's liquid, it's not just solid. And that, I think, is the heart of a lot of what we've been seeing here today. When manipulation is spoken about, we're talking about taking a context in a private setting, which is not the setting of a public MP, but somebody before they entered politics, taking a single photograph out of a group of photos and presenting it in newspapers like The Centrist, articles done by people like Ian Wishart, for example, and not even really knowing that this was Ben's child, his own child, or that there was a carousel of multiple pictures, or the fact that the words were being used in a nickname. None of that was actually reported. None of that was known, and therefore it was very misinforming. We've also seen a massive minimisation of death threats.
The Greens have, meanwhile, played this really manipulative and masterful game here, turning around the story to play victim, to be the poor little helpless people on the end of some unfair treatment, if you like, including so-called death threats, which have come at this guy.
You can see that hundreds of death threats or threats, have been made.
We are currently screening an immense number of death threats and abuse.
That my life and that of my child would be threatened. I have been fielding a significant number of threats to my life and the safety of my child and family, some of which have been so graphic and disturbing that I had been advised not to leave my house or appear in public due to real concerns for my safety.
That's pretty serious. And all of these threats have been handled by parliamentary services, of which at least one has been so serious that it's been referred to the police to investigate. Notably, there has been no similar investigation of anything that Benjamin Doyle ever did. And that fact escapes the attention of all his accusers. Why hasn't there been a investigation by police? Was there nothing here to see? Was he actually innocent? And if he was innocent and did know nothing wrong, is he still guilty in your mind without evidence, just because you've come to a conclusion? We've also seen misinformation on some social media platforms about the FBI and this symbol.
Search blue cyclone or blue swirl online. The FBI have it flagged as a symbol used for pedophiles online to indicate that they are pedophiles to each other or are interested in certain deviant practices.
Believe that a triangle is a circle, then you can go to the FBI and you can find a triangle which you think is a circle, and you can say those two things are the same. A triangle is always a circle. That is basically what is being said around the traps by people who are convinced that this round circular spiral means something to the FBI.
Go and ask AI.
AI. All right then, so I went to AI and I did a Google search and I found the cyclone spiral actually means a cyclone. I also found that it can mean many other things, all sorts of different meanings. And you could pick one out from one company, one security company, that suggests it's some kind of nefarious underworld pedophilia symbol. But when you go to the FBI, what do you find? You don't find a circular spiral, you find a triangular spiral. No, those are two different things. A circle is not a triangle. But there are many people that are kind of part of a lynch mob mentality that don't stop and look at this kind of obvious misinformation, and they don't actually question the people that are kind of coaching them and guiding them through a gate here on social media. And I think it's really important that those people are brought to account for their misleading comments. Finally, I'd just like to say that this is a classic case in New Zealand history of moral panic over very, very little. Somebody who has done nothing really wrong, nothing criminal, there's been no investigation, there's been really nothing but conjecture, which is all being taken out of the context of a nickname known and nuanced within the use of the language, Plus, I'd also like to say, can words be violent? Can words actually cause you to be stressed out so that you do damage to your nervous system, for example? For example, is the threat of being punched in the face and stabbed and killed next week actually good for your health? And is it violent? Is it more scary and difficult for you physically than actually being punched in the face and stabbed in the back? Well, there's some level of violence about both, if you really look at that. However, by a strict and narrow definition, it's not a physical act necessarily to be threatened. Therefore, for some people in that narrow definition, there is no violence.
So he says, the violence against me. There has been no violence.
When it comes to use of language, here's a good quote to actually make this really, really obvious. You behave differently in one context than you do in another. The words that you speak in both are separated, they're quite different, and that is basically what we mean here, that in the context that Benjamin Doyle was using his nickname, it was understood exactly what he meant, and it wasn't the way it's seen in a different context by some kind of narrow, strict definition that is selected from all the other possibilities. That's all I wanted to say to bring a different interpretation to much of what is being said, particularly in the right-wing corners of social media across New Zealand. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you all again soon.